أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, our dear brothers and sisters. Thank you for joining us. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, Enlightened Thought. You can also follow us on Facebook, sydney.org.au. I would like to welcome with me tonight Dr. Hassan Lamy. Tonight's session will feature a contextual scaffolding of Surah Shura and Surah Zummar by Brother Hassan Lamy, and I'll introduce to you the notion of the alchemy of conflict transformation as presented in Surah Shura as well. Without further ado, let us listen to the beautiful recitation of the Quran by Sheikh Mohammed al-Dihnawi for part 1.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. حميم عين سين قاف. كذلك يوحي إليك وإلى الذين من قبلك الله العزيز الحكيم. له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وهو العلي العظيم. تكاد السماوات يتفطرن من فوقهن والملائكة يسبحون بحمد ربهم ويستغفرون لمن في الأرض ألا إن الله هو الغفور الرحيم.
Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. Thank you for following us another night of this blessed month. Inshallah, I'll be starting the first part of the first section with the scaffolding of Surah Shura. Surah Shura is surah or chapter number 42, composed of 53 verses. And it's the only chapter which starts with 2 verses of huruf al-muqatta'ah. So as you know, 29 chapters in Quran start with huruf al-muqatta'ah. Previously we have discussed what this signifies. Just to remind you again, one of the possible interpretation is that they form the coding of the Quranic worldview. Like for example, when we look at the genetic world, the genome project which started in 1990, whereby the entire genetic sequencing and coding in human DNA is made of four letters, as if Quranic worldview has 20 these 29 chapters form this genetic coding of Quran. If we have such a genome project, maybe we can rewrite and reinterpret the Quran from a different perspective. So that's in a nutshell, which we have discussed it previously. When we come to Surah Shura, one of the possibilities about the time of revelation, it is the last chapter revealed before migration from Mecca to Medina. So as you know, Muslims were in Mecca for 13 years and they were under pressure, prosecution, execution and sanction from an economical perspective, from financial perspective, from relationships and so on and so forth. So Muslims and Islam, they were in minority and under pressure. So now they are migrating to Medina, where they will be forming a government, not in a modern sense of it, but whereby they have an authority and they will be governing their own social transaction and social situation. So the context where this chapter is coming down is very important, as the last chapter in the Meccan period introducing the next period. So it's at a transitional position which has to cover both aspects. So in a sense, this chapter is introducing Muslims from the Meccan worldview to Medinian worldview, whereby now they have to have some sort of regulations, laws, in order to govern the social relationship, the individual relationship, and relation with the other, being in this context the people of the book. So, and that's why even the name of the chapter, if we accept the names of different chapters in Quran, is tawqifi, which means it is decided by the Prophet or it is divinely chosen. The name is Shura, which is a complete transition from this worldview in Mecca, where there is no central power to have this concept of consultation. Now you're going to Medina, you're going to be working together in a society. So Shura is one of the major factors or major mechanisms in order to facilitate this social movement and this ideological movement. So which is the name is taken from verse 38. I think we'll be covering verse 35 to 42, whereby there are, we can say, 10 commandments again of this social regulation and mechanism of how to govern your relationships at an individual level and at a societal level. So the name of the chapter, which means Shura, this consultation, this advisory board, is taken from verse 38, which again indicates, when we take it to the time of revelation, indicates this transition from the Meccan worldview to Medinian worldview. Now when we come to the chapter itself, 53 verses, but a wealth of knowledge is discussed within these few verses. So we can divide the number of topics discussed in 6 interconnected and interrelated topics. Number 1 is the pivotal role of the book, and that's how the verse starts. كذلك يوحى يوحي إليك وإلى الذين, where the revelation is coming down. So the pivotal role of revelation and the book, where the chapter starts and where chapter ends as well. At the end of the this chapter as well, there is an indication about the pivotal and central role of the book. And again, this indicates now in Medina there needs to be discipline and order in order to make sure the social relationship and social regulation is in place. And that's why in this chapter two major roles for the book is defined. One is the role of regulations, and the other one is the role of al-mizan, which is in the, so al-kitab is
the scale,
and the scale. So kitab is kutiba alaykum as-siyam, kutiba alaykum al-qital, kutiba alaykum al-qisas. Giving this regulation, these laws, in order to govern these individual relationships and also societal relationship. In terms of scale, because a society, the major thing for a society to run is justice. How are you going to distribute the wealth? How are you going to distribute the resources? How are you going to do conflict resolution? So scale is one of the major factors in this chapter. So the first topic is a topic of the book from these two perspectives: the scale, the justice, and the second in terms of the rules and regulations. The second topic is very interesting. Islam is never shy to discuss and criticize its followers from within. It talks about the issues and the afflictions after the victory. Because now going from Mecca to Medina is a victory, because now they can exercise their belief system in freedom, in basically freely expressing what they believe. For 13 years they were not able, they were under pressure and under all different basically atrocities. But Quran says that usually after a success, after victory, after revolution, we see in the history that there are afflictions where the followers fall apart, where the followers see basically wealth, luxury, and a status and position, and they try to basically sell their soul to the world. While in the past they were revolutionary people, while in the past they were trying to even give their life in the path of, in this context, Islam, or in the context of any revolution in the world. There is no single revolution in the world where after the victory, after the success, you don't have afflictions. And Quran discusses that. So Quran first provides the example of Bani Israel, where it discusses that, and gives multiple issues. For example, in verse 20, Harthul Akhirah versus the Harthul Dunya. Which one are you fighting for, and which one do you want? Or فَمَتَاعُ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا in verse 26. Then talks in verse 12, 19, 27 about the issue of al-rizq and how the Muslims should deal with this affliction, with this basically plague, which every victory, every success, every revolution, even as simple as, for example, we make a mosque. Before making the mosque, let's say in Sydney, we don't have mosque, this area doesn't have mosque. Everyone comes, put the money, unity, they try to work out and make sure everything is functioning. After the mosque is formed, all the disunity starts. Because now we have institution, now we have power, we have status. You can apply this at a small scale, and you can apply at larger scale, whether it's a mosque, whether it's a business, whether it's a school, or at a bigger scale, whether it's a revolution, government, religion, ideology, so on and so forth. So Quran tries to address that, criticize the Muslim from within. So that's the second topic. The third topic is the topic, I call it the politics of patience and shukr. The reason I didn't translate shukr, because shukr is usually translated as giving thanks and gratitude. But shukr in Arabic is when you use what you have been given according to a manual. For example, you are given a book, you use the book in the best possible manner. For example, you're given a car, use the car in the possible manner. So shukr is when you use a gift, a blessing that you have been blessed and gifted in the best possible manner. That's called shukr.
So not just manufacture, but maintenance.
Exactly. So that's why one of the antonyms for shukr is kufr. Kufr is when you don't use the blessing and the gift that you have been given in the best possible manner. So that's why in this chapter we have the issue that sometimes in life you're faced with difficulty. Here you need to exercise patience, as we have discussed what we mean by patience. So that's the qadar. Qadar is this limitation of wealth, of resources, of situation, capabilities, skills, and so on and so forth. Here you need to exercise patience, and Muslims need to do that, especially at the context of the revelation. But now you're going to Medina, there's going to be more resources. Here you need to exercise shukr. So these two, because our entire life is like this sinus curvature, up and down, peak and troughs. So sometimes you're in the abundance of blessings, you exercise shukr. But sometimes you're in deficiency of resources. Here you need to exercise patience. And you know what this chapter provides? Provides a very beautiful example. Provides the example of the ship moving in the seas while the wind comes. Sometimes the wind is with you, so it takes you, you have to use the wind in order to take you in an accelerated pace to your destination. But sometimes the wind is against you. And those who are sailors know that even if it's against you, if you oriented the boat according to an angle, I think 22, you can use the wind which comes against you
in your
favor and accelerate. In other words, even in the situations of deficiency, if you exercise patience in the best possible manner, you can take this boat to your destination. And Quran provides this example. البحر كالأعلام ومن آيات الجوار في البحر كالأعلام in one of the verses of this chapter. And then the fourth topic, and then I'll pass it to you, Akh Mohammed, is after discussing all this, providing the worldview, providing the afflictions, providing the two political movements that you can do, sabr and shukr, patience and using to the best capability, the characteristics of a society of faithful people, which is from I think verse 36 to 44, and 10 commandments is provided. Now you're going to come to this society. How should you work together in this relationship? 6 of these are at the individual level, to form this worldview, to form this moral compass, and 4 of them are at the societal level, how you can function. So for example, these 10 commandments: faith, tawakkul, reliance on the power of God, اجتنبوا كبائر الإثم, that you refrain from the sins, and so on and so forth, where it gets to, for example, again, patience, in fact, this charitable and donation that you need to give to the society in order to make sure there is an equilibrium. So with that, I'll pass it to you, and then I'll continue in the second part.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan Lamy, for opening our intellectual appetite tonight with this beautiful reflection on Surah Shura. And it's, I think, very empowering to see how the Quran names an entire surah according to this civic mechanism which we are in desperate need of reviving and developing in our late modern society, where we live in the midst of diversity.
Indeed.
So Shura perhaps is that mechanism that allows us to translate diversity into pluralism, meaning making a productive and constructive use of diversity and not just acknowledging differences. but rather harnessing these differences to create greater creativity in our society.
Hassan.
Let us now listen to the second recitation of the Quran for our first part.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين إذا أصابهم البغي هم ينتصرون وجزاء سيئة سيئة مثلها فمن عفا وأصلح فأجره على الله إنه لا يحب الظالمين ولمن انتصر بعد ظلمه فأولئك ما عليهم من سبيل إنما السبيل على الذين يظلمون الناس ويبغون في الأرض بغير الحق أولئك لهم عذاب أليم ولمن صبر وغفر إن ذلك لمن عزم الأمور.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, our dear brothers and sisters. I will focus on Surah Shura, verse number 43. However, there is a very important, I think, link that needs to be maintained and revisited from Surah Fussilat, and that is verse number 41, which we did not, verse number 34, chapter number 41, which we did not cover last night. And I think it's a very significant verse in the Quran that links the principles of Shura for our understanding. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَلَا تَسْتَوِي الْحَسَنَةُ وَلَا السَّيِّئَةُ ادفع بالتي هي أحسن فإذا الذي بينك وبينه عداوة كأنه ولي حميم. Good and evil, some translators prefer to use virtue and vice. So virtue and vice cannot be equal. Repel evil with what is most beautiful, and your enemy or your opponent will become as close as an old and valued friend. I'll quickly read off to you the verse number 43 in Surah Shura, which is connected. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَلَمَنْ صَبَرْ وَغَفَرَ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ لَمِنْ عَزْمِ الْأُمُورِ. And whoever maintains patience and forgiveness, this is amongst the articles of self-determination when taking proactive action in light of the ideals of your belief system. My dear brothers and sisters, let me share with you a very interesting reflection on this ayah by Abdul Razzaq al-Kashani, one of the great mufassirin in history. And by the way, he was the author of the book which in the book market is known as Tafsir al-Quran al-Kareem li Ibn Arabi. According to some scholars, the actual author is Abdul Razzaq al-Kashani, who is not, by the way, Al-Fayd al-Kashani. تحقيق الدكتور مصطفى غالب. Al-Kashani says, in commenting on this ayah, ادفع بالتي هي أحسن. He says, إذا أمكنك دفع السيئة من عدوك بالحسنة التي هي أحسن. If you were capable of blocking and repelling the evil and the vice of your opponent with what is most beautiful, do it. فإن السيئة He says, لا تندفع بالسيئة. For vice cannot be countered with vice. بل تزيد وتعلو ارتفاع النار بالحطب. But is rather increased and heightened and heated, just like when we throw wood in the flame of fire.
As in the Arab Spring, the famous Egyptian thinker Mohammed Hassan al said, some of these Arab Springs is إزالة الشيطان بالشيطان. That you are removing a shaitan but using shaitan, which is not going to be functional.
أحسنت. ولا تستوي الحسنة ولا السيئة لكون الحسنة من مقام القلب. He says virtue and vice cannot be equal, because virtue or good, I would translate it as goodness and not just good. من مقام القلب, goodness belongs to the station of the heart. تجر صاحبها إلى الجنة. It takes its dua to paradise. And paradise here, garden of paradise, means being in a state of tranquility and peace. ومصاحبة الملائكة, and you accompany the malaika, the angels. والثانية من مقام النفس, and السيئة, vice, belongs to the station of the ego. التي تجر صاحبها إلى النار, which takes its dua to fire. ومقارنة الشياطين, and it will partner its dua with the shayateen, with the satanic powers. Now obviously when you come across an-nar as an example is actually used across different cultures in different ways, but in our common sense, in our common understanding, we know that fire signifies animosity, it signifies negativity, it signifies
demolition, burning down,
brutality, hostility. And if you think about it, you know, even in the Chinese culture, they say when water and fire meet, definite victory is destined for water. This is another example of this ayah from a different culture, from a different civilization, which goes to show you that these ayat of the Quran are imprinted in the fitrah of the human being across different cultures and civilizations. Nevertheless, this is an-nar. Allah is saying, employ the most beautiful virtue in blocking any possibility of bringing fire to the society, including relationships. Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam is an example of a role model in history who embodied this particular ayah in the Quran. And despite all the oppression Ali ibn Abi Talib endured and had to cope with, he was capable of compromising on his own right in order to embody the virtue of goodness for the interest of the society. After Saqifat Bani Sa'ida, a group of people attempted to create mischief and stir up the clan of Hashim and the members belonging to the family of Abdul Muttalib, saying to them, you know, the Khilafah is now in the hands of those who do not live up to the same capabilities of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And so let us revolt against them. When Ali ibn Abi Talib heard this rhetoric, he rushed. ولا تستوي الحسنة ولا السيئة ادفع بالتي هي أحسن. Now, how did Ali ibn Abi Talib re-articulate this same passage in light of his historical experience at this point of his lifetime? He gathered Bani Hashim. In Nahj al-Balagha you can find this sermon, and he addressed them by saying, أيها الناس, O people, شقوا أمواج الفتن بسفن النجاة. Break through the high tides of mischief with the boats of salvation. وعرجوا عن طريق المنافرة, and stay away from the road of animosity and hostility, creating enemies. وضعوا تيجان المفاخرة, and put aside the crowns of pride. This crown of pride can be your own capability. You may believe, and you have the right to believe, if you truly possess these capabilities, that you are more fitting to be in a position than your counterparts. But when you see that this kind of competition will lead to hostile outcomes that will affect the overall social cohesion of your society, this is when your own morality is tested. Imam Ali alayhi salam said to them, stay away from this pathway and switch on your prudence and wisdom. My dear brothers and sisters, is conflict transformation possible? I mean, when we read these ideals across different scriptures and schools of wisdom, some of us, out of cynical attitude based on what we've been observing across human history, brutality and violence dominates the narrative of the human history. We may say, this is a pipe dream. It has no realistic ground. But I actually surveyed the conflict and peace data to find whether this Quranic philosophy of conflict transformation has a contemporary ground and relevance. And I found a number of international conflicts in the modern age with a reconciliation event. And obviously all these conflicts ended. Let me mention to you a few. Number one, the USSR with West Germany. Number two, West Germany with Poland. Number three, USA and Japan. 4, Japan and UK. 5, China and Japan. 6, India and Japan. 7, France and Japan. 8, Australia and Japan. 9, Greece and Japan. 10, New Zealand and Japan. 11, South Africa and Japan. 12, India and China. 13, Honduras and El Salvador. 14, USA, Vietnam. 15, Ethiopia, Somalia. 16, Uganda, Tanzania. 17, the UK and Argentina. This is just at the level of interstate wars, let alone intrastate civil wars. Isn't this an example that human beings are capable, despite their brutal nature, to exercise this dafa' and tadafu' that the Quran is encouraging across time and place? Idfa' billati hiya ahsan. My dear brothers and sisters, there is something beautiful about the Quranic approach to conflict transformation. It is transformation and not just resolution. And I'll explain how and why. The Quran uses the word waliyun hamim. Hamim comes from the same root as the word humma, which is fever. And I'll finish off with this point. Fever is this intense heat. When you exercise ihsan, which is excellence and beautiful goodness, in order to transform the narrative of hostility into one of hospitality, you become the host who welcomes the other with the heat of your hamimiyah, the heat of this fever of goodness. It is not the heat of inflammation, which is caused from hate, but rather that of hospitality, which emerged from ihsan. I'll pause here. Let us go for a 5-minute break. Inshallah, we'll continue after.
أسألك يا من هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الرحمن الرحيم الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر الخالق البارئ المصور الغفار القهار الوهاب الرزاق الفتاح العليم القابض الباسط الخافض الرافع المعز المذل السميع البصير الحكم العدل اللطيف الخبير الحليم العظيم الغفور الشكور العلي الكبير الحفيظ المقيت الحسيب الجليل الكريم الرقيب المجيب الواسع الحكيم الودود المجيد الباعث الشهيد الحق الوكيل القوي المتين الولي الحميد المحصي المبدئ المعين المحيي المميت الحي القيوم الواجد الماجد الواحد الصمد القادر المقتدر المقدم المؤخر الأول الآخر الظاهر الباطن الوالي المتعالي البر التواب المنتقم العفو الرؤوف مالك الملك ذو الجلال والإكرام المقصد الجامع الغني المغني المانع الضار النافع النور الهادي البديع الباقي الوارث الرشيد الصبور الذي ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير اللهم صل أفضل صلاة على أسعد مخلوقاتك سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم عدد معلوماتك ومداد كلماتك كلما ذكرك الذاكرون وغفل عن ذكره الغافلون
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين إذا أصابهم البغي هم ينتصرون وجزاء سيئة سيئة مثلها فمن عفا وأصلح فأجره على الله إنه لا يحب الظالمين ولمن انتصر بعد ظلمه فأولئك ما عليهم من سبيل إنما السبيل على الذين يظلمون الناس ويبغون في الأرض بغير الحق أولئك لهم عذاب أليم ولمن صبر وغفر إن ذلك لمن عزم الأمور.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi, dear brothers and sisters. Welcome back. Welcome, Brother Hassan Lamy, once again. I'll continue my part on the alchemy of conflict transformation in the Quran. وَلَمَنْ صَوَّرَ وَغَفَرَ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ لَمِنْ عَزْمِ الْأُمُورِ. The American social scientist J. David Singer once said, for an actor to perceive another as a threat, it must see the opponent as having both the capability and intent to block the attainment of one's desired strategies and goals. Thus, by sending trustworthy signals indicating a less hostile intent, reconciliation events reduce the perception of threat between the actors and permit improvement in relations. My dear brothers and sisters, when we speak about the relationship, for example, between Islam and the West, we look at the historical relationship between the two in terms of essentialist frameworks. And what I mean by the essentialist framework is that you basically say that the historical West and the historical Islam, which is the experience of Muslims in the world, is innately and inherently designed to be in conflict as per the experience of conflict. And so there is no hope in actually undoing, because in essence we know is fixed. But as I'll show, we can, even if we take this essentialist approach from a Hassan point of view, we can transform the essence. But nevertheless, the essence is fixed. And so this kind of framework, I think, is very detrimental and destructive to the prospective future of the relationship between the two. Even if we go back in history, we will notice that the history of the West, contrary to popular perception, is not just rooted in the Judeo-Christian history, which is the religious background of the West, but is rather, in addition to Judaism and Christianity, is also rooted in Islam. Recall with me Andalusia, which according to some thinkers is described as the waste of Europe. Al-Islam khasirat Europa. Islam represented in Andalusia is the waste of Europe. And even if you travel today to Portugal and Spain, you will explore the names of streets. You will go to museums and you will discover that Islam has left its footprints in these places and in these cultures. Isn't this an example that ihsan, idfa' billati hiya ahsan, is also encouraging us to build a hybrid relationship with the other, as we belong to the same source, and we can grow and evolve out of our conflict with new forms by virtue of the common virtues we believe in. My dear brothers and sisters, there is a model of human problem solving in contemporary sociological theory, and some scholars have described it as social forgiveness. For example, the Norwegian sociologist Johan Galtung once said, the fact that we are around as human beings living together at an everyday level testifies to a lot of conflict resolution, capacity, reconstruction and reconciliation. He gives us 3 forms of relationships, and he speaks about peace. He says peace is not a property. Peace is a relation, which reminds me of this ayah in the Quran that I recited in my first participation. فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ عَدَاوَةٌ. There is a bayniyah. There is an in-between relation between you and the other. And this in-between relation is always and needs to always be subject to maintenance, to transformation, to revisitation, to repair, to mending. And it is not a property that is owned by one or the other. He says the first type of relations he calls negative, disharmonious relations. Bad for one is good for the other. Second, indifferent relations. They do not care about the other. And third is the positive, harmonious relations. What is bad or good for one is bad and good for the other. So if something is bad for Muslims, it should be bad for non-Muslims. And if something is good for non-Muslims, it should be good for Muslims. My dear brothers and sisters, sociologists speak about 2 types of transformation. One is called mediation, which is to resolve the incompatibility between the 2. And this incompatibility naturally arises from different belief systems, which is a reflection of the universal phenomenon of plurality and diversity. And the second is conciliation, which is healing the traumas, healing the grievances, healing the hostile memories, narratives and stories, removing them from the relation between the parties. Closure, which may be an outcome of mediation. We resolve the conflict, we end the physical harm and the violence, but the trauma remains there. The grievances don't go away. Closure is pacification, which means, and sociologists give the metaphor of turning the page in history of relations and opening a new blank page.
تصفح.
Hassan. Now this in itself is good, but it can also cause indifference. Why? As sociologists say, if that page remains blank, nothing positive, nothing new, indifference will prevail. So we need to write our new stories, our new narratives, our new imaginative relationships for the future on this new blank page and not leave it blank. Ihsan, the elixir of Islam. In alchemy, as you know, and elixir is a Greek word, in alchemy, which was a form of chemistry and speculative philosophy exercised in the Middle Ages, particularly in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. Obviously it is refers to a substance thought to be capable of changing base metals into gold. They also coined the term the elixir of life, which is a substance that would indefinitely prolong life. Now the elixir of Islam is ihsan, because this elixir brings about hospitality, which transforms hostility into that positive fever of virtue and love. My dear brothers and sisters, how? Let me provide you with quick 5 strategies that the Quran presented as examples. Number 1, find which negative interactions are remembered and which positive encounters are often forgotten. And this is known as وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ. Every time you find وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ, remember this first principle. There are forgotten positive encounters between Islam and the West. Let's revive them. 2, لِتَعَارَفُوا. Put to know one another. Put brakes on habits of contrasting one's own cultural ideal. Let's say the West has freedom with the other's practice. let's say, faith in the case of Muslims, and vice versa. Meaning exercise cultural empathy, the desire to know the other on their own terms. Number 3, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى. We should not rush to achieve immediate results and rewards. And we should not expect a quick end of tensions. Complete understanding. We need to work slowly together. Help each side to understand how each community expresses their own concerns and worries in their own language. I'll quickly finish off. Number 4, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ اخْتِلَافُ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُم. Obviously the ayah is وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافُ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُم. That from the divine signs of Allah is the difference in your language and the diversity in your colors. And language here is worldview. It is not just, different dialectics and different language in terms of the lexicon. Recognize that seemingly opposed values can actually reinforce each other by opening new possibilities, both for intercultural relations as well as for the full development of the human character. And finally, وَلَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبْرَةٌ. Reflect on the lessons of the past to reimagine a better future. My dear brothers and sisters, this is idfa' billati hiya ahsan, is a process of proactive initiative. Hospitality entails that you be the host and you take the initiative, you invite the other. Meaning, think of oil and vinegar. When you put oil and vinegar together without stirring the two, oil will be separated from vinegar. But when you mix them together, you will have a new composition that is unique to both of them in their own right. This is the mixing process that we need to do at a societal and ethical level. I'll finish off finally with a prophetic example of conflict transformation, the alchemy. In the 6th year of Hijrah, in the year 628, after 3 battles with Quraysh, the Muslims decided to perform Umrah. Cutting long story short, Quraysh did not allow the Muslims to enter Mecca. And so Quraysh sent Suhail bin Amr to negotiate with the Muslims terms of peace. And obviously this particular incident is an example of the alchemy of conflict transformation, which the Quran described as al-fath al-mubin. Inna fatahna laka fathan mubina. Look at this seal of honor that God has tagged this conflict transformation and made a true victory. Ya Ali, when they came together to write the terms, Ali ibn Abi Talib was the secretary who will write and scribe the terms. The Prophet said to him, Ya Ali, uktub ba'da ismika Allahumma, hadha ma qada alayhi Muhammadun Rasulullah. Write in the name of the Almighty Allah, these are the conditions of peace between Muhammad, the Messenger of Allah, and Suhail bin Amr. Now Suhail bin Amr said, hang on a sec, we are not going to accept this. Otherwise, why in the first place are we confronting you? Should we believe in your prophethood as the Messenger of God?
Even in the name of God, they said Ar-Rahman. They said we don't believe in Ar-Rahman, we believe in Allah.
Ahsan. So the Prophet said to Ali, and this is in a nutshell the school of Islam when it comes to idfa' billati hiya ahsan. He said to him, we can call this a madrasa, a school of conflict transformation. Umhuha ya Ali. Oh Ali, delete Messenger of God. Delete this divinely appointed title. Waktub Muhammad ibn Abdullah, and write Muhammad, the son of Abdullah. Sometimes, my dear brothers and sisters, we need to look at the bigger picture and compromise on short-term interests and short-term titles in order to work in the favor of long-term prospects for the whole of humanity. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Let us now listen to the final recitation for tonight by Sheikh Mohammed al-Dehnawi.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم حميم والكتاب المبين إنا جعلناه قرآنا عربيا لعلكم تعقلون وإنه في أم الكتاب لدينا لعلي حكيم أفنضرب عنكم الذكر صفحا أن كنتم قوما مسرفين.
Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. Thank you, Akh Mohammed, for this insightful comment, which beautifully connects to my next point. As if you remember, I was providing the scaffolding of Surah Shura, and then I'll provide the scaffolding of Surah Zummar, which was recited. The beginning of it was recited by Sheikh Mohammed Dehnawi. So I provided the four major topics. The fifth topic, which is discussed in Surah Shura, is the relationship with the other in the context of Medina, the people of the book, that Muslims need to have not only tolerance but acceptance, and not only acceptance, harmony, because we have tolerance, we have acceptance, we have harmony. idfa' billati hiya ahsan is harmony at the highest. الشورى وشاورهم في الأمر is harmony at practice. So we see from verses 13 to 17, Quran in the chapter of Shura describes this notion that شرع لكم, the Sharia, which is very misunderstood both by Muslims and non-Muslims in the East and the West. Sharia comes from Shara, which means a path to the river. So you have different ways to get to the river. River in this sense is Islam. It's in worldview vision, not Islam as the religion of Muslims, Islam as the continuous message of all the prophets of monotheism. Sharia or Shara is a path to the river. So every nation, every culture, every tribe, every religion has a set of rituals which they follow. So here wants to warn Muslims, don't have this exclusivist approach. Now you're going from the Meccan period to Medinian period, whereby now you're open to the other. Previously you were not that open to the other. You were within a very limited scope of practice and relationship. So you require to have such an approach to the world, in which, as you said, you need to work with the other in the most ihsanic way, or the excellent virtue needs to be practiced. And it requires to avoid negative competition. It requires to avoid the sense of jealousy. I possess the truth. I have the supreme religious position.
Upper hand.
I have the upper hand, so on and so forth. So that's the fifth topic discussed in Surah Shura. And the last one is the monotheistic worldview, which is described in this chapter. Because now Muslims are going to Medina, you need to have a purified and clear worldview, because your practice is the result of your worldviews. The way you see the world, the way the world functions. If you see the world entirely in negative way, you see everyone as negative. As they say, if you're a hammer, you see the world as nails. So that's why this chapter tries to revisit the monotheistic worldview, and it focuses on four aspects. I'm not going to discuss all of them, but the major two aspects of this monotheism is al-malikiyya, the ownership. The ownership belongs to God. No one can claim I own this or the other things. And that's why in this chapter alone, 5 times you have ما في السماوات وما في الأرض له مقاليد. And multiple times this concept that whatever is in the heavens, the skies and the earth belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exclusively. So try to avoid this possessive nature, this negative competition, and work together in a harmonious manner. And the second is al-mashiyah. Mashiyah is like the universal laws which govern the world. I think in this chapter about 10 of these universal laws and decrees have been defined. Some of them are the differences between all the nations, that nations are given these differences, and it is one of the laws of the universe. Don't try to make everyone one, as I think it's in the verse number 8 where it says that if God wanted, we have made everyone the same. وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَجَعَلَهُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً. So it was شاء يشاء مشية. This is a universal law of human existence, that there are different nations. As you said, in the 6th step that you define, one of them is لِتَعَارَفُ, that you get to know each other, become familiar. Become familiar, we have interfaith dialogues, but the problem is you go with prejudices, which means you have a prejudgment before you enter interfaith dialogue. We've discussed dialogues multiple times in the last few nights. Again, another type of mashiyah, this universal law, is the differences in the rizq, which means the wealth distribution. The wealth distribution, which I'll touch upon in Surah Zummar, is again another sign of God, another universal law. There is a difference in the wealth distribution, in financial distribution, in the status distribution, which there is a wisdom behind it, but it is not the topic of tonight. So this is basically the scaffolding of the chapter Shura, and the reason we provide that is when you come and recite this chapter and these verses, you recite with a bit of more understanding. So Mohammed tries to provide this topical understanding where it's more focused. I try to provide this general outlook, which is more sequential in its essence. Now let's move to Surah Zummar in very quickly. Surah Zummar is chapter 43, composed of 89 verses, and it is again part of what is known as the Surah al-Hawamim, the 7 Surah of Hawamim. And the major discussion that it has is about Tawheed, monotheism, but in the aspect of ar-rububiyyah. Who is the Lord? Who is the one giving instruction in life? And then it discusses multiple factors which leads to deviation from this rububiyyah, from sticking to the plan and to the map that God has provided us in life. So in this chapter beautifully it says that if you ask people who is the creator, they will say Allah. وَلَئِنْ سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهُ. Or in verse 9 they will say لَيَقُولُنَّ خَلَقُنَّهُ الْعَزِيزِ الْعَلِيمِ. So they believe in this concept. Some historians say that the people in the north of Arab Peninsula, Hijaz, they believe in Allah, they believe in Aziz Muqtada. The people in the south, in Yemen, they believe in Ar-Rahman, in this type of attributes. That's why they say in Quranic discourse, God has 2 names and the rest are attributes, Allah and Ar-Rahman. They say, who is Ar-Rahman? Because the people in the north of in Hijaz, they did not acknowledge Ar-Rahman, but Yemen, they did acknowledge Ar-Rahman.
As if it's an anthropology of theology.
Exactly. This possessive nature that Ar-Rahman belongs to us, Allah belongs to them, so on and so forth.
There's asabiyya
exactly
underlying this.
But it's all referring to one being and one existence. This is, as you said, it's the anthropology of theology, which is different. So here, Quran wants to say in this Surah Zummar, where the name comes from verse 35. Zukhruf has been mentioned 4 times in Quran, and it refers to the beautification and embellishment. For example, in this chapter, Zukhruf is all these jewelries that you try to embellish and beautify yourself or your house, and so on, and decorate this decoration. But in Quran, it's been used, for example, to about the spring, where when the spring comes, the flowers beautifies the earth. Or for example, some people I think
Al-qawl.
zukhruf al-qawl, where they try to beautify their talk in order to basically deviate others. So that's where the name comes. Quran says when you have a wrong understanding of Tawheed in this chapter, it leads to a very reductionist perspective about the world. Why? Because you believe God is Allah, is Muqtadir, is Alim, is Ar-Rahman, but they didn't believe in this chapter it's Ar-Rahman. That's why Quran comes and tells them another attribute of God is actually Ar-Rahman. Ar-Rahman is about the general mercy of God, because when you have this misconstructed view of God, what happens? You become limited and reductionist in your approach. That's why in this chapter you have Ar-Rahman being mentioned multiple times. I think from memory it's about 7 times, in which tries to say the mercy of God is general to every human being, and you need to exercise this inclusiveness in your approach. So then the chapter, after saying that Tawheed needs to be understood in its inclusiveness, it says there are 3 things which leads to deviation from Tawheed. Number 1 is the love for the world, which is the major reason. That's why you have Zukhruf, you have Israf, you have Hilya, you have Mutrafin, you have Hayat al-Dunya, you have Mata, you have Aswaratin min Dhahab. So that's why many words have been mentioned about this beautification and this
ornament,
and the ornamental aspect of life, and this attachment to life, which is one of the reasons you try to either limit the perspective of God. So God is the creator and I worship him, but it has nothing to do with my lifestyle. So in other words, you can be a Muslim but at the same time an atheist to God in one of his attributes. You are Muslim in a sense, God is the creator and I do my worshipping acts, my fasting and so on and so forth, but God is not the one who decides how I deal with the other. Obviously you don't articulate it,
but you live it.
You live it. You live that lifestyle. So that's number 1. Number 2, this is very interesting in this chapter. One of the reasons for such deviation, when you are imprisoned by your culture, by your fathers here, forefathers is the society that you come from, by their tradition. And you know what's interesting? Quran in this verse, I think it's verse 23 and 24, when the prophets come and say that this is the new message, the mutrafuha al-rifah, those who basically are living the welfare and governing the society, they say, please don't disrupt the social equilibrium here that we have established, because we are enjoying it. We have the zukhruf, we have the hilya, we have the mata', you are disrupting that. The mutrafin say that. And then prophets in a very open-minded manner, they say, قَالَ أَوَجِئْنَاكُمْ بِأَهْدَى مِنْ آبَائِكُمْ. What if we give you something? We're not saying what you have is bad, but we give you something better. Would you still reject it?
It's a service.
Exactly. So this is becoming from a confrontational manner. In other verses, it does say that, for example, maybe they are on the wrong path. Here is saying that let's come from a non-confrontational manner. Say what you have is good, but we're going to give you ahda, what is better. Which one would you choose? So, and again, it's a question to everyone, Muslims, non-Muslims. Are you living the etiquettes of your forefathers, meaning your family, your society, your culture? Have you ever thought about the practices you do, or you just do it? And the third factor, interestingly here, Ibrahim is given as an example. How he went against all the forefathers, the society, the culture, the family, the instructor, the collective memory. He just told them, I think in verse 26-28, bura'a'u minkum. I think that's the verse that I am free from all these attachments. And the third reason is al-jahala, ignorance. Sometimes we don't have the knowledge and we want to present that we are knowledgeable in this field. Wa akhru da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. And to you, Akh Mohammed, if you have any points to add.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hassan Lamy. Inshallah, we will continue in building and unfolding these timeless insights of the Quran. I'll finish off by summarizing both my participation and Brother Hassan's in saying, I recall one of the great scientists of the 20th century, he once said, with all the discoveries that we've experienced and enjoyed, but also felt surprised with in the 20th century, we came to realize that when you write a sentence, let it be incomplete. Finish off with a comma and not with a full stop, so that the other comes and completes it. In other words, when you discover something, present it, but do not close the door for the other to come and further develop it. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
يا من هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الرحمن الرحيم الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر الخالق البارئ المصور الغفار القهار الوهاب الرزاق الفتاح العليم القابض الباسط الخافض الرافع المعز المذل السميع البصير الحكم اللطيف الخبير الحليم العظيم الغفور الشكور العلي الكبير الحفيظ المقيم الحسيب الجليل الكريم الرقيب المجيب الواسع الحكيم الودود المجيد الباعث الشهيد الحق المكين القوي المتين الولي الحميد المحسن المبدي المعين المحيي المميت الحي القيوم الواجد الماجد الواحد الصمد القادر المقتدر المقدم المؤخر الأول الآخر الظاهر الباطن الوالي المتعال البر التواب المنتقم العفو الرؤوف مالك الملك ذو الجلال والإكرام المقسط الجامع